This is Bill Cosgrove. Welcome to the last session of a two-day conference. So first of all, I want to thank everybody who has managed to stick it out so far. I'm a retired pediatrician, so I practiced in Murray for 34 years. And since that time, I retired 8 years ago, I've been spending a lot of time um, um, trying to fully understand the mind-body connections that affect all of medicine, all of psychology, and all of education for children. And so I titled this talk to kind of focus on the connections of the child's physiology. So that takes up the physical, chemical, neurochemical, neurological functions of the bodies of the child's physical bodies and the child's psychology. And by that, I mean the mind, the emotions, the attitudes, motivations, thinking, because both show up in a child's behavior. And forever, well, at least since the 1600s, we in the Western world have accepted, mostly without really much study, so an arbitrary separation between a human's thinking and every other human function. And if you think, I mean, it's sort of just been accepted without much thought. And we accepted that we are rational beings and we can calmly decide rationally, carefully, coolly how we would behave in every situation. And the total separation of the brain from the body, it was so deep that when I was trained to be a pediatrician in the 1980s, I was taught essentially to care for the physical health of a child's body and to leave the mental health, behavior, emotional stability, the child's thinking, and the child's learning to parents, teachers, and a lot just to luck. Well, as soon as I started practicing, I was essentially forced to recognize that the brain and body were very tightly intertwined, that essentially every physical problem that I saw in a child had an emotional overlay. The parent or the child was frightened or even angry, and that every emotional problem that I discovered also had some physical symptoms, and that these two things were inseparably intertwined. And so I had to kind of make sense of that, and I came to the conclusion through reading and study that behavior is mostly driven by safety seeking in the child, and it's always the child's that first priority of the child is seeking safety. So a lot of what I do is advocacy work. And as an advocate, I ended up talking with legislators and other decision makers about children's needs. And they're busy and they've got another million things on their plate. So I try to keep it as simple as possible. I don't suggest that I think that they can handle more complexity, but as far as an advocate goes, you sometimes only have that 30-second elevator speech to get the point across. So I try to keep the message as simple as possible. And here's the simplest metaphor that I have, that a child's success, their happiness in life, is like a three-legged stool. One leg is their physical health, including nutrition, including their physical comfort. Another leg is their emotional safety. And the third leg is an opportunity to play. Now, you all, as experts, know that play is certainly an underserved word. And by play, I mean the child gets to invent and to discover how things work, to understand their world with trial and error, and essentially act as a little scientist to make sense of their world. Well, of these three legs, if one of the legs is weak, if one of the legs fails, the whole stool collapses. The child's life collapses. So, poor behavior, naughty behavior is kind of part of what we're talking about today, is usually triggered by some physical discomfort or emotional discomfort. Now, even adults have difficulty distinguishing their physical discomforts and from their emotional discomforts. And your, as an early childhood educator, your job is to figure out how to figure this out and sort this out for a child. So not an easy job. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today is how do we figure this out? And I'm not going to give you any easy answers. So sorry, spoiler alert. So here's this beautiful picture of an iceberg. And as you already know, only about 10% of an iceberg is visible. And the child's behavior is just the visible 10% of the child's life. And what about the other invisible 90%? And partly you can think of the behavior as the child's not very clear communication to the adults in his world about what they are experiencing at the moment. And so our job as people who care about children, how do you find the meaning? How do you translate that garbled communication? How do you understand the whole child, including that invisible 90% of what the child brings to the job today? So it's detective work. And again, I'm going to phrase this as open-eyed curiosity about the child, not just about the behavior. So there's a beautiful picture of a iceberg. Here's my PowerPoint attempt to draw an iceberg. So first of all, a couple of concepts. No person, child or adult, wakes up today and decides to have a miserable day and decides to make those around him miserable too. So the first axiom that I believe is that every one of us brings the best that they can be today to their work, to their play. And the best that they can be is affected by their current state of stress, their current level of comfort, everything else that's going on in their lives. And so behavior is only this visible small part. And I'm going to ask a question. Can you see the cursor? I tried to make it bright. Anyways, so the behavior is the visible part. But the next question is, when the child acts out, we should try to understand what they're experiencing, what they're trying to communicate. So is the behavior simply in response to some immediate trigger? Such that, is he pushing his friend because his friend just pushed him? Is it his emotional state? And that is affected by what's going on in his family this week, what's, going on with him and his siblings, the relationship he has with his parents or with his buddy at preschool. Has he been exposed to some sort of bullying or some sort of abuse? Is his current emotional state kind of flared up? And then his physical comfort. And here's, as a pediatrician, there's all sorts of ways for a child to be physically uncomfortable. And you obviously know some of them. Is he tired? Is this the first sign of an illness? When you are getting ill, the first thing you know is your body feels off. You have a sense of anxiety even before you notice that you're feeling feverish or before you notice that you're feeling achy. So it could be an illness coming on. Did we happen to ask the parent at the drop-off, did they even sleep well last night? Did they wake up happy? And so that physical comfort is an important question that we need to ask whenever we're dealing with the child's behavior. Whether they're acting beautifully today or they're acting miserably today, we sort of have to keep, okay, I'm going to use medical. We have to keep our finger on the pulse of what the child is feeling physically too. And then this persisting relational health. This, I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about this. How did the child get to here today? We talked about immediate things and we talked about his emotional, physical state today, but it's not just today. How did he get to this point in his life? And so we're going to be talking about that. So relational health, and yeah, you can think of this as behavior. You can think of this as attachment. You can think of this as bonding. You can, you know, what the current fad at the American Academy of Pediatrics is to think about it in terms of the um, relational health, mostly all of the dyadic relationships that a child has with their parents, with their peers, with their siblings. And these are affected by a whole bunch of things, but I'm going to throw out some what I believe are truths. Essentially, all learning and all behaviors in the context of a child's relationships with others. As simple as an infant, being exposed to a new toy. If you watch them close, the first thing they do is they look at the toy and they look up at mom to see if it's okay. Am I supposed to be afraid of this new thing, or am I supposed to be happy about this new thing? So even their experimentation with this new toy or this new book, um, they do it in relationship to kind of make sure that it's safe. And the child's response to any situation depends partly on the cumulative experience of all of his experiences, all of his relationships, in all of his history. Um, so, uh, and I'm going to give you what I think are truths. Everything that the child experiences changes him. We know how, a child is learning every moment of their awake, but they're probably experiencing things even when they're asleep. And everything that they go through leaves them a little bit changed. So the child that you know yesterday shows up a little different today. Um, and it changes his response to subsequent experiences. And these changes, again, both psychological, essentially software learning changes that he brings to his behavior, and physiologic changes, hardware changes to the brain and the body. That also goes through daily changes. And of course, it doesn't just start at birth. So let's talk a little bit about temperament. The classical belief is that temperament, um, that's the child at birth. Okay. And a child at birth already has a certain of sort of behavioral set points or states. The usual list is activity level and emotional intensity, adaptability, their general mood, their distractibility, their sensory threshold. Um, and I was taught and learned until just recently, we all believed that was hardwired in DNA. But recent research suggests that temperament is also um, available to be changed, and um, these it's been affected by mom's stressors during the pregnancy, and um, so who you are at birth is also been affected by your relationships. In this case, that rather personal relationship with the mother through the first 9 months. And then, from birth, the child is totally dependent on others for survival. So when you look at an infant's, newborn's behavior, it clearly is driven for the drive for safety. We are at birth thrust into a world that's suddenly bright, suddenly noisy, suddenly cold, and all of that leads to a rev up of our autonomic nervous system, our fight or flight response. And the easiest model is to think of it as our first reaction, even from birth on, is fear. And every new experience triggers that fight or flight response, the sympathetic nervous system, and also called the stress response. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And we immediately cling to mom or other caregivers to help soothe that response. So, and that the soothing involves the parasympathetic nervous system, and I'll talk more about that later too. But essentially, you can kind of think of it as all of our automatic system to refresh and repair our lives. And again, every experience in our history kind of shifts the balance between the sympathetic and parasympathetic tone. And every new experience either adds or subtracts from our emotional resiliency. So, um, um, So the child's behavior is seeking safety. So that's the first concept. From the day of birth, the main goal is survival, and that requires building trust bonds with protective adults because, of course, he can't survive, protect himself alone. And so a couple of terms. Bonding is the parent falling madly in love with the infant. It doesn't really require anything on the baby's part. It's the parents, usually mom, falling in love with the baby. Attachment is what we call that dyadic relationship between the mother and baby as the baby gets to be more of an actor in it. And attachment is what the child brings, the child learning to trust in the safety of his parents, and secure attachment of the infant to his parents creates a foundation then for trusting others. I'm sure you've heard about the circle of security and just how secure does the child feel in your child care setting? Can he separate from the parents at drop off? Is that with ease or fear? Can he transfer some of that attachment to you? Can he sort of build attachment relationships to his peers, to the other kids? So essentially, the child's emotional reactivity keeps growing and changing, but it depends on his relationships and parental bonding. So there's a sensitive time in the first hours after birth, and the mom has a gush of oxytocin, and that parental bonding is affected by the mom's current stress level. It's affected by mom's and dad's history of adversity or trauma. The child can achieve either a secure or insecure attachment. Most of the research suggests that about 60% of young children have achieved sort of a secure attachment in their relationships. That's 4 out of 10 who have insecure, not very robust attachment strategies. And then obviously the child's relational health is also affected by any adverse childhood experiences that he experiences, or positive childhood experiences. It's all adaptable, it's all learning, it all changes every day. And so it brings up some questions. The biggest debate about childhood is their life about nature or nurture? Is their behavior driven by genetics? Is it in their DNA? Or is it nurture? Is their behavior driven by experience and their body's epigenetics and reaction to those experiences? Well, I'm not going to settle the debate for you, but I can tell you what my vote is. At any given moment, the majority, probably 90% or so of our genes are essentially quiescent. They're switched off. Epigenetics, which are directly affected by our history of experiences, again, our relational experiences, switches on some genes, switches some genes off. So as I look at the balance, nurture and the quality of our relationships has the greatest effect on our behavior. But that doesn't, sort of help you with the child's misbehavior today. So we have to kind of work toward understanding. So I'm going to try to understand what the child brings to this. And so first of all, at birth, the child's brain is about the size of a lemon. By age 2, it's tripled in size. It's about the size of a grapefruit. By age 2, it has 100 billion neurons. Now, that's a big number. So to kind of get a sense of what 100 billion neurons is, it's about the same number of trees as there are in the United States, from Florida to the Everglades of Florida all the way up to the forests of Alaska. Lots, lots, and includes all of those trees in your backyards and parks and forests. 100 billion neurons. That's what the child has to work with. And each of those neurons has about 10,000 synapses. So that leads to 1,000 trillion synapses. So getting back to my tree metaphor, that's about the number of leaves on all those trees and all those backyards and forests. And uh, uh, so this child's brain is an amazing, almost miraculous cluster of possibilities with unlimited potential. The child's learning and adapting every minute, making in new synapses, pruning others. All that learning and adapting, again, gets back to the health of the child's relationships. So, and again, you've heard the estimation that a newborn's brain forms 1 million new synapses every second. So 5 minutes later, that baby is a different baby. And, every day that child is a little bit different, a little more mature, have been changed a little bit. And it's a moving target for you to understand. So, um, so there's both physiologic and psychological effects that are affected by our experiences by that relationship, those relationships. There are, and I'm going to talk about each of these in specifics, but there are structural effects on the brain size. There are chemical effects. You can think of those as hormones from our neuroendocrine system that are fight or flight response. There are epigenetics, which kind of monitor and affect our DNA responses. There's chronic inflammation and there's social learning. These 5 things are physiologic changes to the brain. Not just learning, but they are adapting. And our experiences, again, cause both software changes and hardware changes. So I'm going to belabor the hardware changes, the actual physical and physiologic changes to the brain for a minute or two. This picture, if you can read the label, it's from the Institute of the Unsalvageable in Sighetu, Romania in 1992. Romanian orphanages, these kept these children. They had lots of children. They kept these children in essentially in these little isolation cribs, each in their own little jail cell. These children were well fed, kept clean, kept dry, kept warm, but they weren't read to, they weren't hugged, they weren't played with. This is the brain on the right is from one of those Romanian orphans. And essentially, just by having no real access to relationships, his brain didn't develop anywhere near. A normal 3-year-old brain is on the left, and that Romanian child with extreme neglect is on the right. And again, that child wasn't physically injured. It wasn't abused. It wasn't tortured. It was just not given access to relationships. Has horrendous effects on that child's life. So I talked about structural changes from the brain. And now I'm going to talk about changes to the neurochemical or hormone changes. So our neuroendocrine system, and we don't think about that much, but essentially it really is controlling our survival because the neuroendocrine system affects reproduction and bonding of adults, sexual behavior, lactation, maternal behavior. It regulates our metabolism, our intake, our fat metabolism. Really affects whether or not we're overweight or not. Body fluids, it affects our electrolytes, our blood pressure. It affects our immune response. It makes us either more or less vulnerable to infections and to cancerous changes. And it controls the body's response to threat, the fight or flight response. So the um, the chemical or hormone changes, the upregulation or downregulation of the neuroendocrine hormones depends again on your experiences. Being treated poorly or simply ignored can leave your fight or flight system upregulated, sort of constantly switched on. So you're always on guard and, always in a threat response. So the third mechanism deals with the child's chromosomes. So um, the easiest metaphor here is that the chromosomes are the set of blueprints for building or repairing our cells. And you can think of the blueprints for building a house. The contractor in the basement who's installing the plumbing gets a full set of blueprints, but he just reads the pages that he needs for the plumbing. The guy building the roof, again, gets a whole set, but he just reads the roof pages of the blueprints. Well, epigenetics is the control of which portions of our chromosomes get read in which cell at which time. And each cell in the body gets a full set of the chromosomes containing 20,000 genes, and they're controllers called histones and methyl groups that either switch on or switch off or modulate individual genes. So again, doesn't change the gene, they're stay the same, but it decides whether or not the genes are going to be acted on. And that so our early life experiences affect that modulation of which genes, how much they're turned on or off, or up regulated or down regulated. And you can think of if you've gone through either neglect or trauma, the epigenetics can upregulate the genes responsible for your fight or flight response. Again, leaving the child in a chronically sort of hypervigilant, on guard, switched on kind of state. Oh, and some of these modifications are heritable, so it actually can cross generations. So another thing that leads to, again, hardware and software changes is chronic inflammation. And the inflammatory markers are elevated in either acute physical or emotional stress. So if you're chronically emotionally stressed, your body is in inflammation. And so think of inflammation as it's a critical part of healing. In To heal a wound or an infection, you first need to remove dead or injured cells, and you can think of inflammation as well, the easiest metaphor there is if your kitchen is being remodeled, the first thing is they have to demolish the old stuff. They have to pull out the cabinets. They have to tear down some of the walls. They have to bring things back to the studs to prepare for healing. But chronic inflammation is the demolition part just keeps going on, and you don't ever get around to the full healing. And if you're chronically inflamed, again, it costs you today, but it also costs you about health in the future. And then another thing, this is more of the software of things. There's also, obviously social learning, and a child learns or adapts or changes every minute. And we mentioned that, and by trial and error, by watching and mimicking others, but also some of the misbehavior, some of the behaviors that a child goes through is from learned behaviors. Perhaps learning from their parents how to react to a new stress with either passivity or aggression. And so anyways, each of these, five things: structural changes to the brain, neuroendocrine changes, epigenetics, inflammation, social learning, affect our emotional set point and influence how we will react to the next stimulus. So essentially, changes the balance between, are we going to be mellow and easy to get along with today, or are we going to be kind of oversensitive and likely to act out? So, getting back to the sympathetic response, the name sympathetic response sort of doesn't have anything to do with sympathy. So most of these reactions um, um, are triggered by fear or um, emotional stress, and they're all worsened by feeling trapped, unable to escape. So a child in your preschool um, can't escape it, and that worsens whatever he's going through. And if our fight or flight system is already alerted and on high alert, we can easily be triggered into misbehavior. So, and that could show up as fight or flight or freeze or fawn or flock. So let me talk about those because it isn't just fight or flight. So obviously, the easiest one is fight. Getting angry, pushing, yelling, throwing, hitting um, either someone else or themselves. Um, Flight is running around and running away. And in a closed space, a child may be sort of buzzing with excitement and running, trying in a non-logical way to escape. And then there's freeze, and this is the child who's just sitting quietly in the corner, a kind of checking out, disassociating, going passive, maybe staring off into space. That's a red flag, obviously. Fawning is a behavior that you may not recognize as a stress reaction, and that is when a child is stressed or an adult is stressed, they sometimes cling to whatever is the safest person in the room. So they may cling to the teacher. They may not leave your side because they are frightened, and they can't tell you what they're frightened of, but they cling to the teacher because that's a zone of safety. And then flock is that, again, when you as an adult are frightened, you want to be close to somebody, anybody. And because, again, we're all more scared when we're alone. We're less scared when we're with somebody. So flocking, and that it shows up in a preschool class as kind of um, abnormally sticking to an age mate, even if they don't want you there. So the easiest way to think of these emotional stresses is the metaphor of fear. And so let's take a moment to just understand fear and its fight or flight response. So I'm going to have you kind of maybe close your eyes, but at least picture a walk in our beautiful mountains. The nice day, you're relaxed, you're calm. You can feel the heat of the sun on your back. You can feel the crunch of your boots on the path. You can hear the buzz of the insects in the brush. You can smell the flowers. And then 10 feet in front of you, there's something curved on the path. Is it a stick? Is it a snake? Before you can even think about it or name the danger, your body already is reacting. You might jump, you might freeze in place, your breath stops, your situational awareness vanishes. You can no longer feel the heat, no longer feel the crunch of your boots, no longer hear the insects, nor smell the flowers. You are reduced to just your vision, and even that is just kind of locked in place on that curved object until you can assess the risk. So fear shuts down most of our awareness. Um, Fear makes us all stupid, and it shuts down our thinking. Now, I'm gonna give you another example because I want you to feel this, and um, because you need to go back to your classrooms and feel what's going on in that child's life. So, sticking with the mountains, let's picture yourself fishing on the bank of a nice stream. Beautiful day. You're out there and you're reeling in a nice fish, and you look up, and somebody's coming for your fish. So when we encounter a bear, our neuroendocrine, our fight or flight response kicks in. Cortisol and epinephrine surge, our blood pressure jumps up, blood sugar goes up, we pump more blood to our muscles, And meanwhile, the things we don't need in that emergency get shut down. Sleep, digestion, our immune system, all shut down for a while. And but while we are experiencing fear, we don't think. Our situational awareness is constricted. We just react. So you can think of it as impulsivity. But when the bear is running at you, you don't take the time to consider your options. You're programmed to just jump. You don't even look where you will land. A child who's stuck in fear is distracted, jumpy, impulsive, um, not thinking, and it leads to bad choices and misbehavior. So what do we do about it? Um, so first of all, by misbehaving, the child is obviously communicating something. He's crying out for attention, for comfort, for reassurance. Um, and our job is, can we discourage the troubling behavior, encourage positive behavior, but without discouraging the child? And so what do we do in response to misbehaviors? Well, first of all, we have to suppress what I'm phrased here as our all too human reaction to punish. Um, Punishment kind of feels good when we're trying to change someone else's behavior, but it doesn't work very well. It doesn't teach the child a new behavior. It just motivates the child to suppress or hide the behavior that you don't like. And our job as caretakers for that child is to understand and comfort and educate. And again, trying to give the child what the child needs without having it reinforce the bad behavior. So it takes a little bit of eloquent words or even dancing to get that. And we want to clearly communicate that we love the child, but we don't like the behavior. So I've been working with children for 40 years, but I learned something about 2 decades ago watching my own daughter raise her twin sons. And she did something that was brilliant that wasn't brilliant enough to do to raise her. But anyways, her phrase to her one of her twins was, I love you too much to let you hurt your brother. So let's cuddle on the couch for a minute. Let's calm down. And then let's think of a better way to treat him. She was verbally distinguishing the love she had for this child from the behavior that she was trying to lessen. And, when a child is inflamed, our words don't get through very well. But first, we have to bring comfort. We have to calm them down a little bit before they can hear our words. So let me talk about our balance. So our sympathetic tone and our parasympathetic tone. So these are part of our autonomic nervous system, our automatic nervous system. It controls involuntary body functions. So we don't really get to decide. But when any of us is experiencing stress, triggering our sympathetic nervous system, our fight or flight response. I'm going to picture, here's my teeter-totter. If our sympathetic nervous system is switched on and we're enraged or we're frightened, we're panicky, we can't just say, oh, I'm going to think my way out of this. I'm going to tell myself to calm down. I'm going to tell myself not to be angry. I'm going to tell myself not to be frightened. I'm going to tell my blood pressure to go down. I'm going to tell my heart rate to calm down. We can't do that. But what we can do is, because we're on the teeter-totter, if we can increase our parasympathetic nervous system, we automatically decrease our sympathetic nervous system. So how do we do that? Well, again, the parasympathetic nervous system is all of that calming and refreshing part. And so if we can get some relaxing, calming digestion, we can do that. So So first of all, when the child's misbehaving, guess what? Our sympathetic nervous system gets excited too. So first of all, we have to calm ourselves down before we react to the child, before we react to the behavior. The airline's directive to put on your own oxygen mask before you try to help someone else. And so for an adult, whatever works for you can be what helps. And usually for an adult, the easiest way is breathing. So I'm going to do that in a minute for you. But for the child, also things that are calming. So moving tends to calm you down. Breathing calms you down. Singing, hugs, blankets, teddy bears. If we can kind of trigger that parasympathetic tone, we'll automatically bring down the sympathetic tone. So if we can bring up the calming, we automatically bring down the fight or flight response. So again, for adults, breathing tends to work. So again, I think we're not in any rush. So let's talk about breathing. So if you will indulge me, I'd like to have all of us take 4 breaths. And the trick is not breathing in. You can breathe in any way you want. You can breathe it in fast or slow. But once you've got the air, I'd like you to exhale like a balloon deflating. Go limp. Let your shoulders drop. Second one, full out. And third one, makes me cough. One last one. I'm going to ask you, are you as tense as you were just a minute ago? Are your shoulders tense? Do you feel a tension in your body? For most people, it lessens the tension. It helps you to be calm. So for kids, you may be able to teach them that, especially on a day-to-day basis of, hey, let's take a calming breath. But one of the things for kids is if you just hand them a pinwheel, every child knows what to do with a pinwheel, and they have to control their breath to make it work right. And so just holding a pinwheel, they will breathe out and control their breathing, which will then increase their parasympathetic tone. And guess what? That helps them calm down. So you don't even have to talk about it. You can just hand them a pinwheel. The breathing. So part of the fight or flight response is holding our breath. And you know that. You probably don't think about it, but if I popped a balloon behind your head, the first thing you'd do is go and not breathe in or out again until you knew that you were okay. And so holding our breath is part of the problem. And if we can talk ourselves into exhaling, letting go of that breath, we can calm ourselves down. Tends to break the spell a little bit. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to understand what the child is trying to communicate. So first of all, the behavior isn't random. It has some meaning to the child, although not a logical verbal meaning. It has a physiologic meaning to the child. But every behavior is trying to communicate something to you, the adults, because you're the safety place. So the child is somehow trying to ask you for safety. And obviously nonverbal communication is easier than verbal communication. So again, they're not going to come up with the words. But if we pay attention, we may be able to understand it. So the question is, are we sensitive enough to hear the message? And are we curious enough to read the child's unspoken signals? So our best approach is for sort of deliberate, focused curiosity about what the child is feeling and what the behavior means. Again, the behavior isn't random. It has some meaning to the child. Your mission detective is to figure out the meaning, figure out what he's trying to tell you. And no matter what pain and fear the child has endured up to now, you have an opportunity to build new positive relational experience, to change his forward trajectory. So, first of all, understanding and then teaching a better behavior, not punishing. So here's my PowerPoint description of Duplo building blocks. So picture building a tower of Duplo blocks. Each block is a new skill or a new learning or a new way of being or a new thought or whatever, new words, whatever. So immediately after birth, the infant first needs are to seek safety, calm his raging fears, and first of all, and trying to co-regulate his emotions with mom. And again, bonding is the mother's almost immediate falling head over heels in love with the infant. But what if that mom's bonding that with that infant is disrupted? And I apologize for all of our hospitals. I've been, I've taken care of newborns at 5 of our area hospitals. They're all crummy at trying to help the mom with bonding. So what if if the hospital separated the mom from that infant during that important first hour or two gush of oxytocin? So at least delaying, maybe decreasing mom's bonding. During that first hour, we don't talk about it much, but especially with direct skin-to-skin exposure, mom's oxytocin levels the pulses happen more often, and the pulses are 4 times as high as they ever are in the rest of her life. And essentially, it sets her up, accelerates her falling in love with her newborn. And again, if the baby is whisked off to the NICU or the baby is taken for something to check his glucose or if mom is moved, we disrupt that a lot. So again, if you know anybody at the maternity ward, get them to fix that. Anyways, and then what if mom is depressed or anxious? Half of new mothers in Utah report being either anxious or depressed before or after a birth. And that can lead to her reactions being inconsistent, disrupting the infant's secure attachment. And so that foundation may not be fully formed or solid. We may have weak or missing building blocks. But life goes on. So the baby has new learnings, building on that foundation, whether the foundation is strong or not. Learn some self-soothing, maybe some nuanced communication, such as cooing or gestures. And he learns new motor skills, learns new words, builds his development. And on a good day, when the emotional loads are light, or just happen by luck to be centered over the stronger portions of his foundation, the child's emotions and behavior are under control. But on a bad day, what if the emotional loads happen to be off balance? The whole structure can fall. Our little guy can, be in meltdown so then the next question is, what can we do about it? Well, it's not hopeless. We can't undo this child's history of experiences. We can't give him something that he didn't get in early infancy. We can't change his history, but it isn't hopeless. We have things to give. We may have to back up a bit and help that child relearn, perhaps learn for the first time, some of those earlier skills. Trust, co-regulation with an adult, self-soothing, and then learning self-regulation and learning persistence and curiosity and all those traits that we would like to have him already learn. But to do that, to build kind of an alternate sort of support framework for the things he's missing, we have to be willing to go back a little. We have to meet the child where he is at developmentally. not according to his physical age, but according to his emotional or developmental age. That might mean cuddling or rocking or singing, perhaps even swaddling, going back to build, you know, we have to be careful here. Um, we're not, well, we are treating him like an infant, but we're going back to try to fulfill some of those earlier things that he didn't get to build a stronger foundation of emotional skills. So, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is difficult. I'm not saying any of this is easy. So, our job is educating. So, first of all, every child deserves to be known and seen for who he is, known by their name, known by their strengths, known by their story. But each child is a fragile mix of physical comfort, emotional comfort, a history of experiences, all affected by relationships, and all having an impact on today's behavior. Um, again, so let me talk about just educating. And again, this is my assertion that all skills are built upon previously built skills. So if those previous skills are missing or weak, we may have to go back and shore them up. It certainly doesn't work to skip steps. So if a child is missing something, us rushing to go to the next step probably isn't going to help. So we may have to go back and fill in some steps. So cognitive learning, which we're hoping to do at preschool, depends on emotional readiness. Well, emotional readiness depends on emotional self-regulation skills. And those self-regulation skills are learned from emotional co-regulation with their parents. And co-regulation depends on stable, predictable relationships. So we've got this house of cards, and it's fragile. And each child is fragile, and we are trying to make sure that the house of cards gets stronger. And so our job, as carers for children, can we be curious enough to figure out what's driving the behavior today? Is it something simple just today? Is it something this week? Is it something for his whole life? And, are we devoted enough to focus our attention on the needs of the child and what the child is trying to tell us and not get distracted by his behavior? And, we need to deal with his immediate need for safety and comfort. And then we need to create a plan to help the child develop some relational skills and some resiliency for his future. So in summary, I started with the metaphor of that three-legged stool, a child's physiology, his health, his physical comfort, whether he had something to eat for breakfast, his balance of his neuroendocrine hormones, his psychology, that his emotional tone, his temperament, and again, his learning, his play, his experimenting with appropriate feedback from his adults. They're all these three things are all tightly intertwined. It doesn't help the child or you to figure it out to try to separate them out. And so in 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 an episode that's where the child is, either retreating or zoning out or misbehaving or even enraged, it's up to the people who love him, his family, his teachers, to quell the urge to just react to his behavior, but instead to hesitate, take a breath, calm yourself down, and carefully choose a response that considers his physical needs, his emotional needs, and today's opportunity to learn a better behavior. So deal with the emotional storms first, calming, quieting, comforting, then begin teaching a new, more appropriate behavior. So You, our preschool professionals, are saints and heroes. I feel privileged to share my ideas with you, and I have not made it simpler for you. I've delved into some of the complexity below the waterline in our iceberg, but I hope it gives you some things to think about to bring to that child who on Monday is going to, um, uh, um, struggle in your classroom. And that's the end of my talk. I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody has.
It looks like we don't currently have any questions in the Q&A, but if anyone does have any, we have a few minutes before this session is done, and we would love to hear any of your questions.
Um, so, am I still helping patients? I'm retired, and so now my help is in advocacy. So um, I serve on four different boards, and I'm on at least a dozen committees in early childhood education, in infant mental health, maternal mental health, the Breastfeeding Coalition, and I am definitely trying to make the world better for children, but um, but I'm but I'm not. I'm no longer actively practicing.
All right, we have two questions in the Q&A now. So the first one is, what is the research saying about repairing the missed bonding opportunities?
Um, so bonding is the mother's response. Okay. So, and again, I want to separate that out from attachment, which is the child's response. Um, and the essentially, you can think of bonding as falling in love with the child. And that is partly emotional and it's partly cognitive. It's partly the mother's commitment. So, a mother who adopts a child and misses out on that early infancy stuff still can um, develop a very strong long-term bond. So, uh, but in some cases, it needs help. As I mentioned, half of our mothers struggle with anxiety, depression, which um, muddles their emotional responses. And so, if you're anxious um, and mom is fearful, it's harder for her to just um, do what falling in love entails. Falling in love entails sort of being preoccupied with this other person, paying attention to every little detail. For a mother, one of the things, I've had the privilege of being at a couple thousand deliveries. And one of the beautiful things is that right after birth, despite the pain, the fear, the anxiety of being, in the delivery room, mothers switch almost immediately to not paying attention to anything else the medical staff is doing and just focusing on that beautiful person that was just laid on her chest. And it comes down to um, being emotionally and cognitively alert to paying attention. Because, like, when you watch an infant's face or a toddler's face, things happen fast. They have different emotions that flit across their face within a third of a second or, a tenth of a second. A tiny bit of fear and then a sudden surprise, or a little bit of curiosity and then a little fear. And if you're paying attention that close, which you do when you're in love with somebody, you you get a rich communication. So if bonding didn't work out, it takes a little bit more focus, um, and probably doesn't need a therapist, but a therapist could help you there. But essentially it's not a one and done thing. If you missed it, you missed it. It is, you can um, build it if it wasn't built. You can repair it if it was built and then broken. A lot of the maternal, I mean, the mother-infant experiences, especially with attachment, um, uh, talk about making and breaking the relationship so that, like you've all seen the things about the infant still face, the maternal still face experiments, where if the mother looks away from the child starts getting anxious within a second or two. And mom looks back and smiles, and the child relaxes again. And it turns out that attachment is stronger when there's a whole bunch of make and break kind of things. So when you think about, again, back to a slightly older child playing peekaboo, children love that game. But if you watch their face, mom disappears behind the piece of paper and the child starts getting nervous. And then mom re-experiences and there's that gush of relief. And so it actually, that making or breaking the relationship turns out to strengthen it. But you have to know, you have to be really sensitive to how much is too much for the infant. So again, yeah, uh, and we can all build it better. I mean, again, focusing on the relationship is going to help what you feel, but also is going to help each child. So that was a long-winded way to answer the question, but and whoever asked the question, did that answer your question?
While we're waiting to hear if that did answer, we have two questions about resources. So one is, what are your favorite resources for learning more about the brain-body connection and its application in early childhood? And then the other one is, do you have resources to explain to parents so that they can understand that relationship?
Okay, well, the first resource, when you've got a child who clearly isn't attaching well to other peers or to the staff of your preschool, um, the Children's Center is our tertiary care center for the state. They have, for when it's way broken, they have the expertise to kind of help, and they have outreach to all of so you can get advice just by calling them up. So I don't have their phone number, but realize that if you have a child who you're scared about, who just isn't emotionally handling things, they can help you deal with it. As far as uh, my own educational learning, I've read several hundred articles over time. I've read several books, but the articles kind of fill out the picture better for me because each of the books kind of focus in on one area. Um, and actually, probably the most readable one is what's it called? Um, Oprah Winfrey and Perry. What's Bruce Perry's book? What Happened to You? Yeah, what I think that was the title of the book. Is a very readable. It's a conversation between the psychologist and Oprah Winfrey, and it really delves in deep to trauma and our emotional responses and bonding, and I don't think they talk much about temperament, but it's very readable and it's not a textbook. It's a conversation, but it's very accessible, and I think it leads to a pretty good understanding. So that's the one I'd recommend. Um, I've read other books, but that one probably is the easiest to access. And somebody in our chat agrees.
All right, well, that was all of the questions, and we are a little over time, so that we'll let everyone go so they have a little break before our closing session, which begins at 3 o'clock. Thank you so much
Right,
for
and
this
thank you
wonderful
for your
session.
attention. Bye-bye.